Hello, beautiful people, and welcome to another episode of the Infertile Diagnosis. I'm your host, Monica Cox, and welcome back to another episode of the Infertile Diagnosis. Today we have on a very special guest, Dr. Emma Brodzinski. Now, as you know, if you listened to the Closer Today clip last Tuesday, Emma has bravely come onto the podcast and opened up not only about her infertility journey, but about her emotional abuse that she suffered during her childhood. When I asked Emma to be a guest on the podcast, she took a little bit of time to come back with me on what she wanted to talk about, of how she became her own hero. And I want to read you the email. I know I did this on the Closer Today clip, but if you didn't listen to it, I'm going to do it again. Or if you have listened to it, here it is again. Hi, Monica. The thing that is really on my heart at the moment is dealing with a fertility journey after having experienced some kind of body trauma and how fertility treatment in particular can trigger all sorts of stuff. I have a history of sexual, emotional, and physical abuse, and as a result, I had really cut off my relationship with my body, and my fertility journey is where I realized I really needed to get back in touch with it and learn to love my body. Now, anyone who has dealt with any kind of trauma during their childhood knows how hard it is to open up about these things. And I personally, from my experience and from what Sarah and I discussed on the podcast a few weeks ago, I feel like even emotional issues that happen during your childhood really kind of goes in. You carry it on through your, adolescence and young adult and even into being an adult. And this baggage that we take with us through growing up can have a really big impact on not only our emotional well-being, but our physical well-being. It's all very linked, and it's hard to see because you don't see it, right? Like, you're not seeing your emotions, and you're not seeing the down to a cellular level, can't even say the word, of what is going on in your body when you hold on to the past. And it's not about letting go of anything, because let's just face it, letting go of anything that has affected us during our childhood is very easily said than done, and it just doesn't happen that way. We all know that. But it's about dealing with them, I guess first recognizing that we even have an issue. I've talked about loads that I didn't even realize how insecure I was, until my infertility journey highlighted that. And then finding your way, your right way of taking control of these past emotions and events, dealing with them, and moving on through life a much happier and healthier person. I feel really honored that Emma decided to come onto the podcast and share her story with me and all of you guys. I think it takes an extra level of bravery to really put yourself out there, especially it's just so emotional, and being vulnerable and letting other people know that they're not alone. I truly hope this conversation with Emma opens a lot of doors for more conversation like this, and anyone out there listening who has been through something similar gives them the strength and the support they need to help tackle these issues and be able to do the work necessary to reconnect with their own body. So without further ado, here's the lovely Emma. So welcome back to another episode of the Infertile Diagnosis. Today we have the lovely Emma from London. It's kind of making me a little homesick. Not that I feel like UK is my home, but yeah, it's nice to talk to a little British accent here. So give us a little information about yourself and about your infertility journey.
So it's very gorgeous to be here, first of all. So then my fertility journey. So it was many years, and with two different partners, which when I say that, it sounds awful, right? But that's the truth of it. So it started with my first husband, and then we were trying to conceive and ended up kind of being referred for IVF with unexplained infertility, but that relationship then sadly finished. And then so a few years later, with my second husband, we ended up on a journey and ended up being referred for IVF for unexplained infertility. So of course there was so much that went on in between that, but those are the big milestones, I guess. There were loads of milestones in the middle of that. I'm very good at rambling, Monica, so you might have to,
That's all right.
pull out what it is you want to hear.
So unexplained infertility.
It was unexplained. So it was a long one. It was unexplained infertility and ended up at the IVF clinic.
Okay. Yep. And so when was this? What year was it?
So it's blimey. So starting off, because this ran through my mid to late 20s, and then my babies were born. So I had triplets when I was 39. So, and I'm now 48. So this is clear. So a while ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is before Instagram, Facebook. This is before all the amazing books on the shelf. There was, like myself, very little information. You were on the chat groups, getting any kind of support or advice. I mean, Google was around, so you probably killed yourself with Google, the wasted hours. And like we're still finding now in fertility clinics, it is a very, let's just look at your ovaries, your womb, the sperm. And if we can't explain it from there, then you go to do IVF, right? There was no diet and lifestyle. There was no mental or emotional support. It was just, this is how you make a baby if you can't make a baby naturally.
Yes. And this I very nearly didn't go through with IVF because that approach horrified me. And I remember going to the clinic open evening, and they were showing us the hatch. They showed us this hatch. I'll never forget it, because they were showing us the biosecurity, right? And and it will be passed through this hatch. And I was like, this is just awful. I don't want there to be a hatch involved in the making of my baby, because in my mind it has always been about thunder and lightning and this gorgeous conception moment. That's what I wanted. And so I came away from that and I was like, there is no way I am doing that. I'm not doing it. It's horrific. And I had a good friend who talked me down and said, well, kind of just look at that, think about how you are going to go forward and make your child with love. And so that switched something up. Well, I'd already been on a bit of a journey to that point anyway, and having arrived there, kind of going, I am going to love my body, which we'll talk about more in a minute, I think, but I'm going to love my body, and I'm going to love this child into existence. I then made a deal with myself, is that if I went through IVF, I would do other things too. The IVF would be part of a story. It would not be it. And so I made sure that was part of a whole set of practices that I was doing to support myself to bring my baby into existence.
And what did those include?
I gave everything a go, really, but no, seriously, it was actually about a range of practices. So of course the basics in terms of diet and nutrition, and as you say, there wasn't an awful lot of information out there at the time, but I hunted it down, whatever was there. But it was also about a lot of soul work actually for me. I always said that this was boot camp for the soul, and it was a lot of work on myself, which ranged from yoga. Like I found yoga and I fell in love, that, and still that sustains me to this day. But also, I mean, I did Reiki and shamanic journeying, and I threw everything at it. But actually, I can tell this story in a range of ways. One way is like, oh, I just did everything and it was a bit crazy. Actually, when I look back on it now, it's like I was filling myself up. I was making sure that I was open to the universe, and I was filling myself up with good stuff. And so I did kind of acupuncture and all of those kinds of things. And I kind of created rituals for myself, and took that whole process of kind of healing and entering into a motherhood phase really seriously.
Yeah.
So that for me, this was not a clinical story. That was part of it, but I refused to let that be the be all and end all.
Yep. And so 3, you have triplets. Was it the first go? Did you do frozen?
Because I'm an overachiever. in a way, it, of course, I hit the jackpot, and that blows me away. But also,
can I interrupt you there real quick? So when I did IVF in the UK, they were really strict on how many embryos they put back in. Was that the same for you? Why did you get 3 back in?
I didn't get 3. I got 2
and
one
split.
2 and 1 split. But I think there was so much energy. There was so much energy there that it kind of, it's like I really, I felt that doesn't necessarily make sense, does it? But
no, it does, because the thing is, you were putting in a lot of hard work, right? It wasn't like you maybe cut out gluten a little bit and you were doing a little bit of yoga,
Well, I was all in. This was my job. This was my job.
You were visualizing the future. You were hyper focusing on your IVF treatment and your journey, but in a very positive way. You weren't thinking the negative thoughts. And I don't want to say that to people in the sense of like, that's what you have to do to get pregnant, because at the end of the day, that isn't the be all end all. If you are working on all your inflammation and all that, those positive thoughts are even going to increase your chances. Like for me, if I didn't sort out my inflammation, it didn't matter how happy I was. If I was shitting out rainbows, I wasn't getting pregnant. So there is a balance, but you were all in with everything that you were doing, that you had information of, right? You didn't have the overwhelming information maybe that we have too much of today.
It's true. But yes, I knew that I had to, this was a time to focus on me. And actually, I think because my focus had been not on me, that was really important. It was really important. It was a gift to myself, and it was a gift to my potential future children. And like you, what I'm not saying is, oh, just be positive, and that's nonsense, really. So you can't just be positive, but focusing and really saying, this is what I want. This is really what I want, and I'm going to go all out for it. And work on what I need to work on the scary stuff.
So that's gonna kind of be our topic for today. We're all about being your own hero, and for you, IVF was a massive trigger for some past events in your life. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I think because IVF brings you, well, the fertility journey to start with brings you into a relationship with your body. Now, for some people, they're already in a relationship with their body. For me, I was kind of not in a relationship, or in a very problematic relationship with my body. I'd experienced in my teenage years sexual and emotional and physical abuse at home, and at that point there'd been a kind of a shutdown, which of course I didn't really realize that at the time, but knowing what I do now as a therapist and having done a lot of therapy, this is what happens, that actually the psyche protects itself by doing what we call dissociation. So you kind of, they're a part of you, and you can see it. It's explained in different ways in different practices, but this sense of kind of coming out of your body, that your consciousness kind of leaves your body. Shamanically, which is, I'm getting much more interested in that now, that there's a kind of sense of the soul leaving the body, but psychotherapeutically, a sense of a splitting, of a not being connected anymore. And that makes sense because your body isn't actually a safe place. It's you. I was not physically, sexually, emotionally safe. And so it makes sense that I kind of went, that part of my psyche went, I need to keep myself okay, and I'm going to leave that. So coming to this, as I say, in my early 20s or mid to late 20s, I had set my life up so that I wasn't particularly in contact with my body. I was an academic, you know, that being, I excelled intellectually, and that I was very happy in that world. I was about ideas, and I was up here in my head, and my body was a way to get me from one place to another. And I wasn't really connected with what was going on at all. But then trying to get pregnant, of course, I then was like, oh, right, well, now I need to start to think about my body. And that then brought up, there's lots that didn't feel good about my body. I didn't feel good about my body. I didn't feel connected to my body necessarily in a positive way. I didn't look after my body particularly well. And again, that's very usual after trauma, because the messages that I'd had about my body was, you know, I wasn't worthy. I mean, that would literally been sent to me. I wasn't any good. There was that it was for somebody else to do whatever they wanted to, and that was that. And so I kind of came to thinking about my fertility, which really didn't make sense to begin with, in terms of very slowly, of course, starting to think about my menstrual cycle, becoming aware of that. Like, this was, I was really at that place, Monica. It was that basic.
It's, you know what, I'm really shocked of how many people I speak to that did not know their own menstrual cycle. Like for me, I was always regular, you know, whatever, I can feel ovulation. So in my mind, like, every woman knows that, right? That's what it is. And in reality, it's not. And I want to step back, because with your sexual abuse, did the door just get shut on it after it finished, and you didn't talk about it to anyone, and you just left it there? Or was there a time that you kind of dealt with it a little bit before?
So I think I think I'd done a little bit of work for myself. I hadn't really had any counselling or anything. I mean, I think we're going back a while now. So this is the 80s, and even then wasn't really. It's kind of, do you want to go to the police or not? Oh well, you know, that was, and I didn't want to go to the police about it, because it was, you know, it was that wasn't I didn't feel equipped to do that. Mm-hmm. So actually, that didn't get processed very well at that time. Yeah. And it was kind of left for me to do what I could do with that. And what I did with that, looking back on that now, what I did with that, and in many ways kind of successfully, is when, okay, all right, I'm going to live my life in a way that this doesn't matter. My body doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. And so I think I felt like I had dealt with it. I felt like I had processed it. But I hadn't really. Yeah. And so, and I think then on that first leg of the fertility journey, if you like, actually coming into a relationship with my body was a challenge, and I welcomed that. Actually, on that part of the journey, I ended up having a phantom pregnancy where I ended up, I didn't have periods, and I kind of, my mind had convinced, was so much wanted to be pregnant, that my body kind of did that. And I think, again, that shows the disconnect that I had. I didn't really know what was going on in my body. My mind was running the show. So then on that, the kind of the second leg of the fertility journey, if you like, is when I really got, by that point I'd had some therapy. So
Okay.
by that point it gets a bit more, I was like, okay, right, so
Yeah.
I know what's going on here. And I think I'd had some therapy, but I again, the thing is that these things aren't fixed easily, and it would be silly to go, oh well, you just do this and then you're fine, because that isn't how it works. But I think I knew more that of the deeper work that potentially needed to be done, I guess.
Yeah. What was your first thought when you were like, oh shit, I really have to deal with this, because it's not going to go away and it's going to actually cause even more issues? And maybe it was the biggest catalyst for your infertility, was that emotional disconnect. What was your thought process in that? Were you
I guess
scared,
the thing is,
nervous?
I'm a bit of a Pollyanna, and I think I'm a Pollyanna in a way that is that I think.
Okay, just for our American viewers, what is
right.
Pollyanna?
So Pollyanna is a kind of optimist and seeing things in a positive way. And actually, I think that has been, in a way, it's a kind of pejorative term in terms of, oh, you're a bit of Pollyanna. Actually, I made a conscious choice, because I could have fallen apart in terms of what had happened to me. But I was like, do you know what? I'm going to see the positive, and that is how I live my life, in terms of looking for the positive way forward. Which isn't always the easiest way, is it? But it's the kind of is the positive way. So I think how it came about in terms of that work was not, oh my goodness, it was kind of like, what's the invitation here of kind of like this, in order for me to fully be open to this, what do I need to do? Does that make
Yeah.
sense? And that was more what it was about. And in terms of me being all out for it and being open to whatever it took. And I remember actually one night going, I will do, like, to the universe, I will do whatever it takes. I will do whatever it takes. And so then I knew that meant some serious attention to loving myself, is what it came down to, really.
Yeah.
That was the bottom line.
Yeah. And so what what tools did you use to start dealing with this?
So again, it was very baby steps to begin with, really tiny in terms of loving myself, because again, this is quite common, as I know now, but that sense of not actually having compassion for yourself, because if you've had that kind of trauma, that's seated in you, in terms of not loving yourself. What the messages that you've got is not about valuing or loving yourself. So actually listening to my basic things, which I knew were good for my fertility, but also were about paying attention to myself, is resting when I was tired, instead of pushing, resting when I was tired. That was massive for me, because I was a workaholic, and that sense of really just dropping down into, what does my body need? What does it need? And